This one time, I went out on a call of a suspicious person at a house near where I was at. When I get there, the guy tells me that someone knocked on his door, and when he had gone to see who it was, there was a woman standing there on his driveway with some sort of child-sized doll with horns, and it looked all bloody and cut up. So he asked the woman, who was looking away from him, what she wanted. She turned around and told him that she needed food, then proceeded to start screaming at the top of her lungs and ran at him. So like a normal human being, he slammed the door in her face and called the cops. I get there, and there are well-defined claw marks on his door, but there's also a good bit of blood, I suppose from her fingers. So I call out and start the search on foot. I also had 2 or 3 units driving around the area to see if they can find this woman. So I'm about a block away from this guy's house when we get another call that the woman is back in the guy's house, but in his backyard. So I run about a block back to this guy's house and bust into his backyard. The lights are out, so I took out my flashlight and I'm looking around. I see this chick huddled in the corner next to a fucking evil-looking doll, and I ask her if she's okay. She doesn't say anything. At about this time, one of the other units came back to the house and parked his unit where the headlights were shining on her, so we could see how scary this chick actually looked. She had long black hair, her clothes were rags, she had no shoes, clearly homeless, and she kept whispering things to the doll. So my buddy and I approached her and tried talking to her, and she just kept whispering to the doll. I couldn't understand what the hell she was saying, so we decided to drag her out of there. The second we put our hands on her, she literally went insane, punching, kicking, slapping, all kinds of shit. So we're fighting with her, trying to get her on the ground, and she's not going down. I'm gonna be honest, this chick was strong as hell. Well, in the fight, she somehow got away from us, and was sitting in a crouched position, with her head tilted to the side, and making the creepiest growling or snarling sound I've ever heard. I don't even know what to describe it. Then, she screamed at the top of her lungs and charged at us. So, my buddy was quick to think, and jabbed her straight in the face and knocked her out clean. We cuffed her, and hauled her off to the hospital where she tested positive for PCP and various opiates. She was charged with battery of an officer, resisting arrest, and trespassing. Later, she was institutionalized for some sort of mental disorder. Not quite sure what it was. My department didn't have anything more to do with her after she went to jail. Warning, the story that I'm about to tell you is very disturbing, so watch at your own risk. I live in a fairly small town. My dad was a cop for 10 years or so. My aunt works in the ER going on 11 years now. And at the time of this story, one of my best friend's brother-in-law was an EMT. They are all involved in this sick tale. There was a call about a domestic dispute, then a 911 call from the same address from a woman who was just screaming and then cut off. Of course, they sent all available units immediately. After a few officers had showed up, they reported the situation back, and the chief decided no female officers or EMTs should be allowed near the scene. It turned out a Hispanic man was on drugs, and he had freaked out on his girlfriend, accusing her of cheating. He beat the shit out of her, broke several bones. He decided that their 3-month-old baby wasn't his, picked up the infant by his feet, and gutted him with a box cutter. When the cops showed up, he was beating on his girlfriend with a kitchen utensil, while she huddled over the baby, trying to shield him with her own body. They got him under arrest, rushed the baby to the ER, tended to the wife in the ambulance out front, and sued several cuts of the man in the kitchen. The EMT attending to him was my friend's brother-in-law. The man was still high, but coming down and saying a lot of disgusting things about his girlfriend. The EMT slammed his head into the refrigerator, warning him to stop talking. A surgeon was in the room, saw this, and gave the EMT an approving nod. A few minutes later, the surgeon got fed up with the man's clearly unapologetic words and said, "Do you hear that woman crying? She trusted you to take care of you, loved you enough to give you a son, and look what you've done to them. She didn't cheat. You never let her leave the house, so how could she? The little boy is your son. You could have been a father and raised him, and made him a good man. Now you've taken the child's life. That woman who loved you so much is out there weeping because she just lost her son, and her boyfriend doesn't even care at all." The man said that if the baby didn't want him to kill it, then he should have died before it was born, and the woman deserved it because she was a dumb bitch, cheating or not, and the sergeant shot the guy in the foot. My father witnessed all of this and later had to testify. My aunt said in the ER the baby was lying there and his intestines were literally laying next to him on the gurney, outside his body. Every single person who worked on the baby requested therapy afterwards. The mom had some pretty bad internal bleeding, but my aunt said the most disturbing thing was hearing her scream for her baby. She said in all her years in the ER, she's never heard anybody scream like that. The mom and the baby actually both lived, but the baby had some serious brain damage because he didn't get enough oxygen to the brain because of a punctured lung. The man is in prison now. I know he got drug charges, weapon charges, domestic battery, attempted murder, and a few other that I'm not sure of. What I do know is that unregistered guns were found in the home, as well as more drugs. I do know he has no possibility of parole, and he has a very long sentence, but I'm not sure how long the sentence turned out to be. The sergeant and EMT were both fired. That was the hearing that my dad had to testify. This is a very disturbing case, I know, and sadly, this is the world we live in. This story is not mine, but a good friend of mine, who was the youngest recruit to pass police training in the area for a long time. At 19, he was fresh onto the service. I went for a pint with him after a week, and you could tell that he'd seen things. So I asked him what it was like being in the police. He told me about this one time where they were called to a domestic violence case. They got to the house and opened the door. Instantly, a whole load of sewer rats, not pet rats, flooded out of the house, and there was no one home. The lights were on, the TV was on, but it was silent, and the loud voices they had heard just before were just gone. The only life there was were the rats that ran out of the house. They searched the house, every nook and cranny, and found no one. He and his partner for the evening stayed around for a while and waited to see if anybody came home. But after a few hours of waiting, no one came. The neighbors couldn't even explain it either, so they left. A few minutes later, they got called to the same address again by a different person stating that there's a pretty heated domestic going on. This time, they brought the dog squad to find people, but again, the house was deserted. He said the freakiest thing was that the toilet had blatantly been flushed when they got there and the cistern was still filling and the kettle was now boiling. The dogs also found nothing. To this day, he doesn't know what the fuck was going on in that house. He also mentioned one other thing. He said that the first time he went to that house, he was with his partner, but even though he was with his partner, he felt like somebody was watching him from every dark corner, and when he would look, nobody was there. At first he thought this was an imagination, but when he went upstairs alone to check in one of the rooms while his friend was checking in the other one of the bookshelves unexpectedly in the room fell over and creating a loud thud. Of course his friend came up, saying what the hell is going on. He looked at the bookshelf and then looked at the wall where it was. He then told me that the bookshelf was standing in such a manner that it couldn't fall by itself. It was only if someone or something pushed it. He said ever since then he never went to that house, even if it was on duty for him to go.